Hey guys, in today's video, we are going to be talking about the president's team, and we're looking at specifically the people closest to the president that help him carry out a policy agenda. So up to this point, we've looked at the formal and informal powers that the president uses to implement a policy agenda, but the reality is the president is just one member, probably the most important member, arguably, of the executive branch, but there are many, many, many other people that help the president implement that policy agenda. And one of the roles of the presidency, the chief executive, actually helps the president, carry out this or his policy agenda. And we'll take a look at that in this video. So, as I just mentioned, the power of the chief executive gives the president the power to appoint a team to execute the laws and to accomplish the policy agenda that they were promising during their campaign. Now, this chief executive and administrator role, remember, is outlined in Article 2. This specific power is in the Constitution. So the ability to appoint this team, quote unquote, and that can be many, many people, as we will see, is a part of the Constitution. Throughout their time in office, a president will appoint thousands of executive employees, and some of them require approval of the Senate, some do not. And when I say that, they serve at the pleasure of the president. Usually, as we will see, these are people closest to the president, and some are even kept on when a new president is elected. So this is kind of termed the permanent government, so to speak. And we'll talk about this as we move forward into the presentation, as well as when we look at the bureaucracy. Now, this team that the president appoints, right, because they're one person, they do need help. This team is going to assist the president in making day-to-day decisions that shape the fate of our country. So this is who the president relies on to help him make those decisions. And the president makes a lot of decisions, as you can imagine. So these are all of those people. The first person is the vice president. I think you guys could have thought of that one. Remember, the vice president is selected before the election. So this is a little bit different versus the other people that we're going to talk about, since it does happen before. So there's not an official confirmation process, but this person is selected in consultation with the presidential nominee, as well as the party of the presidential nominee. And this is usually someone who balances the ticket. And we've talked about that a lot. The president, the nominee, the political party wants a person on the ticket, on the ballot, that will bring in and draw in a wider voting base and bring appeal to the campaign. So you can also think of like balancing the ticket. They're going to complement the presidential nominee, right? The goal is to try and have as many people voting for those candidates as possible. The job of the vice president is to simply assist the president, and they have a largely undefined job description. There are just a few things in the Constitution that are outlined as jobs, quote unquote, of the VP. So the VP serves as the president of the Senate. That's like their official title. They oversee the Senate when it's in session, but they do not have a vote normally. They only vote if there is a tie. So the Senate is tied 50-50. And right now, our Senate is tied 50-50. So Vice President Kamala Harris will most likely be making some tie-breaking votes throughout Biden's term. And then in the Constitution, added later, is the 25th Amendment, and that declares that in case of presidential removal, death, resignation, or inability to serve, the vice president will resume the president's duties and power. So this is your succession amendment. If the president can't do the job, the VP takes over. And that's largely it. Most of the vice president's job is going to be whatever the president deems them necessary. In recent years, presidents have delegated a lot, or more, I should say, than previous presidents to the vice president. So, for example, when we were looking at Trump and Pence, during COVID, President Trump appointed Pence to really be the coordinator of the nation's response to COVID. And Pence using his powers of the vice presidency, called on those disease experts that we were looking at, like Anthony Fauci, for example, to recommend policy based on scientific data on the spread of diseases. So that was a job delegated to the vice president by the president. Now, there is also a cabinet, and the cabinet consists of 15 departments that act as the president's advisors. So now we're really getting into the team portion that is described in the Constitution. Now, something you guys need to know is that the cabinet is created by Congress. Only Congress can create members or cabinet departments, I should say. These cabinets and their leaders, their advisors, their secretaries, as we will see, do require Senate confirmation. So they do have those hearings. And each department is headed by a secretary of, insert cabinet name here. So, for example, the State Department is one. They have a Secretary of State. That is the leader. Secretary of Education. We have an Education Department. The only exception to this is the Department of Justice. They are headed by the Attorney General. So there is not a Secretary of Justice, it is the Attorney General. And all of these secretaries, Attorney General, that's what I was referencing here. They require Senate confirmation. So here is just a flow chart of the actual executive branch with the cabinet. As you can see, there are 15 departments, including the vice president. We are going to take a look at several of these as we move through the rest of this unit. These positions are a part of what is called the federal bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy is the next section of this unit, but just to give you a preview, these are the departments and agencies that carry out the responsibilities of the government. So once policy is implemented, who actually carries it out, right? Who actually enforces the law? This is the federal bureaucracy. So to these departments and to these secretary positions, the president tends to appoint someone who is in the president's party. They have experience in a relevant field of government or in the private sector, meaning like the Secretary of Education. I know in this particular case, President Biden really wanted to appoint someone who was in education. And I know his nominee for Secretary of Education taught in public schools and has been an administrator for many, many years. So that's what I'm talking about with relevant experience. And modern presidents have tried to create a balance in geography, gender, ethnicity, partisan ideology. They want a diverse team because they know that their likelihood of getting their agenda accomplished is to have that diverse team. So this is the cabinet table. Whenever you see images of the president meeting with the cabinet, this is the seating order. So you can see, you've got the chief of staff, which we'll talk about. The president here and the vice president sit across from one another. And then surrounding them, you have the department members as well as members of the executive office of the president, which we'll get into here in just a moment. There are two notable cabinet departments that I want to start off talking about, just so you are familiar with them as we go through this unit. The first is the State Department, headed by the Secretary of State. So this is the main diplomatic body of the U.S. Their job is to promote U.S. foreign policy across the globe. Diplomatic, remember, dealing with other countries. So part of the responsibility of the State Department and the Secretary of State is to manage and operate an embassy and have an ambassador in every recognized nation, someone who represents the U.S. with that country. So remember, the president appoints as chief diplomat the ambassador, confirmed by the Senate, and then the Secretary of State then works with that ambassador and the embassy in that other country. And then we also have the Defense Department with the Secretary of Defense, and they operate out of the Pentagon, which is a building in D.C., and this includes the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And their job is to coordinate and supervise all agencies and functions that deal with national security and the armed forces. Now, one of the key features of this Defense Department that really helps the president with, national security, foreign defense, is the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is a council of the top uniformed officials in each division. So the top member of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines from each division of the military, and they advise the president, the Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council on military strategy. So their job is to advise, right? They're the top people in each of the branches of the military. They're advising the president. And we'll see them come into play when we talk about the executive office here in just a second. This is the current Joint Chiefs of Staff. As you can see, they are uniformed officers. Okay, let's talk about the executive office of the president now. So this is distinct from the cabinet. The executive office of the president consists of several policymaking advisory agencies. Again, all of these people, this team is advising the president, helping them figure out what to do and make decisions. These staff members work directly for the president, and they work to create the policies that can then be proposed in Congress to be made into law. As I said, this is distinct, separate from the president's cabinet. And it's a little bit different because many are considered to be privately hired by the president. They do not need Senate confirmation. Many of them do not, at least. So there is more of an informal aspect here. Now, the EOP, the Executive Office of the President, was formed in 1939. And the reason for that was by 1939, the government had become increasingly complex. And it became common knowledge that the president needed increased assistance beyond the cabinet. So they needed more help because the government was growing more and more complex as we navigated through the Great Depression. The EOP is not found in the Constitution, so this is not a requirement to have, but every president since 1939 has had members of the EOP to assist them in their duties. And as I've mentioned, many of these people are professionals who work permanently as government workers for the White House. So as you can see, the EOP consists of many agencies and bodies. We're going to just talk about a few of them that assist the president. So the first is the National Security Council. This is one of the main organizations of the executive office. You'll see this abbreviated the NSC. And this is a group of people who advise the president on issues relating to, as what it sounds like, defense, diplomacy, international economics, right? So members, as we will see, include, the vice president, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the State Department. The National Security Council, their main job is to coordinate the information that comes from the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the State Department. And they advise the president on different courses of action when dealing with a crisis or confrontation with foreign combatants or enemies. And remember, they can only offer advice. As commander-in-chief, it's up to the president to make the final decision. At the top of the National Security Council is the National Security Advisor, and this is someone who is very, very close with the president. So on this NSC, the National Security Council, the vice president is one of those who is being briefed, as well as the Secretary of State, Defense, and Secretary of Treasury. So, their basic job is to communicate this information coming from national security agencies to the president. The OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, is another big office of the EOP. They're responsible for producing the president's budget for the executive branch. And then remember, this budget is then submitted to Congress for approval. Almost all of these employees who work in the OMB do not need to be confirmed by the Senate, except for the director. And again, they are also usually career federal employees. These are usually people who continue to work even when the president changes. So they are more permanent, so to speak. Many departments exist in the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. Their job is to try and make the government more financially efficient, right? There are billions of dollars in this budget that the executive branch proposes, and it's important that each branch, or each dollar, is accounted for to avoid waste and theft. So the job of the OMB, besides producing the budget, is to oversee expenditures for the executive branch. It's going to outline all revenue, all money brought in from taxes, and expenditures for the upcoming year for executive agencies and departments. Their job is to eliminate wasteful spending, possible theft, and just keep tabs on, what the money in the executive branch, where it's going, what it's doing, things like that. And then another big office in the EOP is the Council of Economic Advisors. This is one, I bring it up because I've seen it on AP tests, but definitely know the OMB and the NSC. But the Council of Economic Advisors advises the president on economic policy. What can we do to stimulate the economy? What can we do to slow down the economy? That is part of the job of the CEA. Now, the White House office is another piece of the executive office. The White House staff are the aides, the staff members who work with the president, offering leadership and advice. And one of their main jobs is to not only help the president implement their policy agenda, but also look at the political impact of the policies implemented. So they're keeping tabs on the president's approval rating, helping him manage the bully pulpit, organizing meetings for him to meet with leaders and other members of Congress, and citizens, for example. The White House office is located in the West Wing, and these members are chosen on their loyalty to the president. These are usually members who have served on a president's campaign, have offered some sort of leadership and advice prior. They do not have to be confirmed by the Senate. And one of the, I would say, the biggest member or the most important member of the White House office is the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff manages the day-to-day operations of the EOP and the over 4,000 employees of the White House staff in the White House office. This person makes the president's schedule, determines with whom the president is meeting. This person is known as the president's gatekeeper, right? This is probably the person that works the closest with the president on a day-to-day basis. Now, the White House office also includes the president's legal team, the press secretary, whose job is to communicate important information from the president to the White House press, and the National Security Advisor as well. They're also really, really close with the president and work with them very closely. This is a picture of the actual West Wing of the White House. So the Oval Office is where the president is situated. This is their office. And as you can see, the people of the White House staff or the White House office are physically close to the president as well. They're not only his closest advisors, but also physically close to him in the White House. So you can see the cabinet room, that image I showed of you of where everyone is seated. That is here, close to the Oval Office. You have the advisors to the president and the chief of staff right down the hall. And then you also have the office of the vice president, national security advisor, and the press secretary. So all of these individuals are very, very close physically to the president to be able to get to him when necessary. And as you can see then, the press briefing room, controlled or monitored by the press secretary, is also very, very close as well. All right, guys, that is it for this video. So your goal, think about how the president uses the formal and informal powers of the office, especially chief executive and administrator, to implement their policy agenda, and think about that president's team, right? How that helps him do that as well. So make sure to have all of those examples filled in. Don't leave anything blank. Make sure they are complete and thorough. If you have questions, put a star next to something, ask me in class. And if you are not going to be in class, make sure to upload your notes to the Google form in Classroom. Talk to you later. Bye.